You're on the air. Don't say anything crazy.
Boom, and we're live. Welcome to another episode of Brobears Talk. This is podcast 13. Unlucky for some, those include Trump, because Biden's in. Well, it looks like it anyway, according to everyone but Trump. Brotherly Bear, what's the reaction in the North American continent? Have you felt the shockwaves reverberating in Canada yet?
I've felt them like an earthquake coming through the ground, the epicenter in Washington, D.C., reverberating through the Midwest and crashing across the Canadian border. I feel it in my veins. It's absolutely wild. Biden, he's got it. Trump won't admit it. Pow.
Biden's in. Pow. No, I think on the whole, people I know and I'm proud to know are actually happy about this result. I think yourself included, Brother Bear. I don't think people could bear another 4 years of this man. I think we could have been forgiven in 2016 for not really knowing what we were going to get with Trump, because we'd only ever seen him in sort of a TV personality capacity. And, you know, it's all about pomp and making out things bigger than they really are and being dramatic and all that. But unfortunately, all of that translated into the presidency. There was no filter, especially the Twitter feed. That was a constant source of entertainment for 4 years. In some ways, I'm going to miss that. In a dark way.
I think in a dark, sort of chaotic way. I think a lot of people will miss that. It's been 4 years of erratic signals, really. I mean, we've had so much of an up and down, what with the tweets and how they influence the economy and how they influence everyone's mood, immigration policy, you know, and how comfortable people feel being Americans and identifying as American. It's just been such a roller coaster, and I'm not going to lie, I'm very happy that roller coaster has come to an end.
Yeah, I think on the whole, it's been a difficult 4 years for a lot of people. Although Trump has had his odd, I suppose, policies that have actually inadvertently been good ones, in my opinion. One of them, or rather initiatives, particularly around funding NASA and putting a more robust budget into NASA and going for the moon. I think by 2024, at least that's what I believe was publicized on the NASA website.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
For all of his shortcomings, there is a smattering of good, well-intentioned things. I don't know whether they're well-intentioned, but I think the end result, nonetheless, is a good one, and hopefully it will only inspire Mr. Musk and others to go for the moonshot as well as Mars.
Go for that moonshot and that Mars shot. Boom.
Kapow.
Yeah, I think that a lot of, because I know quite a few hardcore conservative people out here in Alberta, and they were still staunchly anti-Trump, because the thing about a lot of conservative individuals and conservative thought is it revolves around maintaining the vibrancy and efficiency of the economy. And Trump, even though he represented, you know, the far right-wing camp, the erratic nature of his leadership, if you could even call it leadership, led to probably more harm than good, I'd say, in the contours of the economy. And I mean the global economy. I don't just mean the American economy, but certain tariffs, not just with China, but with Canada, and with a lot of other countries. I mean, people forget that Trump was very anti-free trade. So we pissed off a lot of Republicans and a lot of libertarians for taking that stance. And just, I think, if someone's tweeting and sending out really aggressive signals about this company or that individual, and it just makes the value of a particular stock just plummet or skyrocket, I don't think that's a very healthy state for any economy to be in, to just sort of be at the behest of a man-child. And
to the whims and tantrums of a man-child. It reminds me, probably, I was only ever in that kind of a state personally when I lost a Monopoly game. I don't know about you.
No, for me it was Scrabble, but I totally know what you're talking about.
Far more sophisticated and educated game. Well, I don't know. I am getting into property now, so that might just have something to do with it. But no, it is, I suppose, an unhealthy thing on the macro scale if you really look at the big picture of him pushing America to be an ever more insular country in terms of its outreach and engagement with international trade. I think it's a shame because I almost see that as the next stepping stone to moving to a ever more globalized world, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I think it's affiliated with sort of the Clintons, the globalists, and this kind of
the mega banks,
the globalists, the conspiracy theorists, where it one new world order and all that rubbish. But I think there's an awful lot to be gained by an ever more fluid borders and almost a borderless world. I think we've got far more to gain from the collaboration as opposed to being insular. I don't think much has ever been achieved through an insular silo approach.
No, I think history has proven that free movement or fairly unfettered movement of people.
Unfettered. It's one of your favourite words, isn't
unfettered. I've got a fetish for the unfettered. I'd say that the unfettered movement of people and services and bartering, trade, goods, everything has always led to prosperity. I mean, you look at the history of the United States. You look at the development of jurisdictions like Hong Kong, and even aspects of the EU. It's proven that the loosening restrictions on the importance of that line in the sand that we call a border has only really led to freedom and prosperity.
Right, and that divisive development of technologies in particular is already manifest, particularly in the world of 5G, and certain countries, particularly along political alliesmanship, if that's even a word, have sort of rejected 5G, particularly from the vendors such as Huawei, on the grounds of sort of political, I suppose, friendship and established relationships, the UK being a prime example of that. And so I think you've almost got a branching off of Western and Eastern technologies, with China representing the Eastern side, and then Western technologies sort of playing catch up now with the likes of Ericsson trying to play catch up to the market leader, which is Huawei in the 5G world. But it's an interesting thing, and I think we stand to lose a lot of years and decades potentially in terms of what we could have had with technology if we continue down this path of siloing, because that's not the scientific method. Scientific method is based and fundamentally founded on collaboration and the spirit of collaboration and the spirit of openness and sharing ideas. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you look at every innovation that's come out of the world, and it's usually come out of some kind of international collaboration. Maybe that's a collaboration of ideas, taking ideas and innovations from different countries, bringing in different workforces that may have skill sets that your system hasn't endowed. So I think it's only a good thing, and I think the issue with the Trump administration is that it puts so much of an emphasis on America first, America first, America first. And I understand why that was palatable to the American population at the time. Don't get me wrong. Like, under the Trump presidency, I spent a lot of time working in America, in the events industry, going over there, working directly with Americans. And I met many a Trump supporter who was intelligent, intellectual, compassionate, all the things that liberals like to say that they're not. So I want to put out there right now that I don't think that people that voted for him are necessarily stupid or racist. I think that's an idea, that's sort of a delineation that kind of divides America more. But that being said, the presidency of Donald Trump did lead to more division. It led to, I'd say, a politics of hate, or a politics of sort of distasteful slandering. And generally, I think it set America more apart from the rest of the world, which is ultimately not a good thing for the American people.
Definitely. There's almost been, like you say, almost two layers to the divisions, the global divisions between countries and severing of previously healthy ties, with China, for example, being the prime example. And then you're right, there's almost a second lower level divide with America in and of itself, and the divide between Democrat and Republican, being, I suppose, more pronounced than ever. And in fact, if you look at some of the statistics, less people than in a lot less people than in 1992 are now identifying with the middle ground. And so what you've essentially ended up with, where you had like a nice sort of bell-shaped distribution from left to right, you've ended up with sort of a hollowed out center, and you've ended up with sort of the two peaks when in the sort of far left and far right camps, which is a shame, because you've ended up essentially with a more divided America.
Yeah, I think so.
And that's one of the unfortunate legacies of Trump, and potentially, you'd argue, an inevitable legacy of Trump.
Exactly, and that's why I'm pleased about the result, because taking out ideology from the equation completely, I think that another 4 years would have just harshened and intensified the divisions that are already there. And I think Britain's so divided, America's so divided. And some would argue that social media, the echo chamber effect, the state of affairs between people right now, misinformation, fill in the blank, is going to cause division, whatever. I do believe, though, that Trump was and has been, and will continue to be for the next 2 months, a catalyst for that division, and the general espousing of misinformation. So in that sense, taking ideology out of it, taking Republican and Democratic ideas out of the whole equation, I'm happy that he's out. As an individual, I'm happy that he's going to be out of the equation.
Yeah, agreed. I think he's going to try and whip up the division, if anything, because he's just will try and create chaos every and each way he can, just to mess up the establishment and what the due process is now that Biden's got the votes he needs and the states he needs. And yeah, I mean, the whole shebang about him coming out and saying, or having serious allegations and accusations of election fraud, and insisting that he will never give up, just crazy. But then again, I probably haven't seen something like this in my lifetime. I obviously knew about the Gore and Bush, and then fiasco and the whole intervention from the Supreme Court. And hopefully it won't come to that, but you can see where Trump's angling this, because he's elected, like we talked about in our last podcast, that many more Supreme Court judges, 3 altogether, I believe, and therefore has potentially a bit of leverage there, an unhealthy leverage which shouldn't exist at all.
He definitely has an unhealthy leverage. I mean, we're now looking at a 6-3 far right or generally conservative majority in the Supreme Court.
Right.
I think it's good to have a healthy mix, but I'm, again, as I would question the House of Lords in the parliamentary systems of the world, I'm skeptical and concerned about any system whereby people in positions of power appoint the members that make laws and make big constitutional decisions. They should be elected. They shouldn't be appointed. And this is the issue with the Supreme Court. It wouldn't have been an issue if the Supreme Court had continued how it had been up until the year 2000, whereby it was all about interpreting the Constitution, and you had people on the left that would come to right-wing decisions and people on the right come to left-wing decisions. But the Supreme Court can no longer be trusted as non-partisan. It's supposed to be the law of the land, the one aspect of America's separation of powers that is non-partisan and purely seeks truth, logic, and justice for all. But that changed under Bush. It was intensified under Obama, and even more so under Trump. So yeah, there's a concerning amount of leverage that he may have in sort of derailing the process, which I think would be a real shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this isn't a great advert for American democracy, supposedly the bastion and sort of best example of democracy globally. I mean, there was that one tweet, I think, from a Japanese minister who tweeted along the lines of, am I the only one seeing this and thinking, what kind of a dictatorship is this? Where has our role model for democracy gone?
Well, Ralph Nader said it perfectly. America is a two-party dictatorship.
Well, it's probably showing rearing its ugly face more than ever right now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I don't want to be too harsh on America, because actually, in terms of how it delivers federalism, in terms of how it maintains a separation of powers, it's actually one of the most, if not the most democratic Western countries out there. I'd say it's up there with countries like Germany and Switzerland in how an individual's wishes are reflected in government. And I suppose you can say what you will about lobbying, but that seems to be an aspect of crony capitalism, and that seems to exist in every monetarist country. But looking purely at how the system runs in America, it is highly democratic. Again, we're not talking about right or left here. We're talking about how much individuals' wishes are transferred, to elected elites, essentially. But so saying that, I think we're at a scary juncture here in the trajectory of American democracy, whereby one individual has placed in the Supreme Court basically a third of the judges. They're very aligned to his way of thinking, and now he's talking about derailing the selection result, and that's based on completely manufactured and unfounded claims.
Yeah, you can see that's where his strategy is going, isn't it? It's getting it to the Supreme Court and then hoping it won't be as bipartisan as it should be, and then getting him the leanings that he needs. But yeah, I mean, it's not the best example of American democracy, and it's not being exemplified in its best light at the minute. And I think we've talked about this in the past, about how just the sheer volumes and rising levels of information uptake individually are sort of, I feel at least, impeding our capacity to sort of interpret reality accurately. And so that ability to interpret reality accurately is diminished just by the sheer volumes, and our brains get fried, because I truly believe we've hit a glass ceiling in terms of information uptake, at which point we start to conceive of and associate with more simplistic models of the world, which are sort of comforting and simplistic in there. And so kind of in that, amidst that delirium of highly nuanced reality, which is what reality really is, there is always a high level of nuance. We kind of do seek refuge in these simplistic, comforting, identity-based tribes as a coping mechanism. And I feel like that's potentially why America's never got beyond sort of a two-party system, and why you've seen the divide you have.
That's a very, very astute point. It's almost like this division has been fueled because people want to identify with a very firm set of beliefs, perhaps a very extreme set of beliefs with little nuance, because the sheer volume of information that's been spat at them through all the hundreds of millions of articles and blogs and social media posts, 24-hour news cycles, newspapers. It's reached such a saturation point that the only way to mentally cope with that is put yourself in a firmly defined tribe, with an uncompromising set of ideals. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's almost a comfort and a belonging in that. And when you pit yourself against the other side, it's probably harkens back to just the realities of hunter-gatherer life in a simpler time. Because I suppose our fried brains, our fried CPUs are craving something like that. But the sad part of it is that when you go through into a tribe and go through the initiation itself is a sacrifice of open and sort of forthright questioning of the beliefs and assumptions that underpin one's worldview. You kind of stop introspecting the moment you join the tribe, and you just become a part of the group, a faceless person within the group. And sort of individualism breaks down the moment that initiation into the tribe happens.
Individualism is extinguished and replaced with sort of a chauvinistic
group identity politics, and this is where it's all come from, right? And you've just seen the rise of all of these crazy conspiracy theories and all of these fringe groups, Antifa, what was it, the QAnon, all of this stuff, because I think people are just getting to the point of information saturation, and information saturation literally sort of compromises the circuitry and neuroplasticity of your mind to the point of where you just adopt and identify with simplistic narratives as a way to cope with complexity, because it's just impossible to compute and fully interpret, which it is. But you have to be, you can't be in the mindset that I need to know everything and understand everything. accept that there will always be a lot more that you don't understand versus what you do.
Yes.
That will always be the case no matter how intelligent you are and how good of a memory you have. There's always more information out there that you do not know. There's always more that you don't know than you know, obviously.
Of course, yeah. Of course, everyone has a capacity, and however smart you are. And I think there's so much truth in all that, because we're putting ourselves into these sort of firmly defined groups as a coping mechanism. This all comes back to conversations we've had in the past about technology, or rather the way that technology and all the information that we have now is delivered to us is moving faster than our own human evolution.
Right. It's almost like the software is going exponentially faster whilst the wetware has stayed where it always has been for thousands of years.
Yeah, exactly. The wetware is, don't get me wrong, we're improving. We're always improving and adapting. That's what we do as humans. And again, this comes back to machine learning. The machines that we've made are sort of self-learning. Okay, they're in their infancy. We're not talking about anything near general AI. But you look at the way the algorithm behavior dictates the information people get exposed to. You look at the echo chamber effect. You look at the rise of convenience to levels that we haven't ever seen before. I'm not sure that we're actually ready to be exposed to that to the nth degree, which is currently happening. And again, the coping mechanism. What is a coping mechanism? You go back to basics. You go back to your camp defined on your identity, and you stay there, because that's the only way that your brain's able to cope with this insane level of information and misinformation.
Yeah, evolution wasn't prepared for this at all.
I think
evolution works on the time scale of millennia. It doesn't work on the time scale of decades.
Yeah, exactly. It's only...
That's its operating system. Yes. I mean, we are not ready for this high level of change over such a short time span. And what it is doing is evolution's frazzled. We were designed for a very different life to the ones we lead in terms of information consumption primarily. Because the rest of it, you sleep where you sleep, all of that, those biological processes tick over, but you start to infringe upon them when I think information is at the core of it, and potentially an overexposure to it and an overexposure to information, ideas, opinions. It can potentially be a bad thing if you don't have enough time to digest them and build up your own worldview in a sort of forthright and nuanced way. You can only build up your worldview with what you've been exposed to, and you just iterate it based on more information, and you improve it with time. But to sort of identify with one camp on the other and then stick to almost a list of ideals and beliefs, I think is quite sad.
Yeah. It's so limiting. It's and again, it's done as a reaction to the sheer volume and diversity of opinions and information. But it is very limiting. And I don't know, maybe an aspect of all this is what led Trump to power, because, you had the Trump movement and you had the Bernie Sanders movement. Both of them wanted similar things. They both wanted turnover in Washington. But one was on the very far right, one was on the very far left.
Yeah.
And I think even back in 2016, we saw the sort of the rapid forming of those groups, those extreme groups that didn't identify with the center ground, or anywhere in between. And again, this all came out of a time where it's so test and learn with the internet. I love the way Duncan Trussell actually talks about the internet being in its infancy, and he compares it to when we first discovered fire, and like thinking about all the people that died or were injured trying to understand what fire was. Like, I want to get its energy, I'm going to eat it. Like, oh shit, like now your face is melting.
Yeah.
Like he talks about that, and I think that's so true of, and and comparing it to how the internet is now, like it's a highly unregulated thing. No one really understands what it is, including the people that created it. And it's just metastasizing in different directions. Some of them very, very good directions. And it's enabling insane development and, prosperity and freedom for a lot of people. But it's also got this dark side. And that's what's pushing people into these groups, these tribes, really.
Yeah. Make no mistake, we are guinea pigs in a real-time experiment when you're talking about the internet. Yeah. And the scary thing is there isn't anyone overseeing the experiment.
Yeah, there's no one in the lab.
There are just other guinea pigs looking at it maybe slightly externally, but they're all ultimately still subject to the same experiment. So there's almost no third eye.
Yeah, it's almost from the bottom up. It's like a bottom-up experiment.
And no one could have predicted to even 20 years ago to what the internet would manifest itself now in social media and the repercussions of it all ultimately, and we still don't know, and we're learning in real time, and you're almost always behind, and you always will be behind because you can't possibly predict what it will manifest in a year's time, and so you're almost always putting out fires, and inevitably there will be collateral.
Yeah, inevitably.
I'm not sure there's another way around it, really. I think learning in real time and being subject to an experiment you've generated and kind of spooled up, and it can't be stopped at this point, and you're just kind of subject to what it evolves into. Inevitably, there are going to be significant casualties until we start to maybe strive towards something resembling mastery. But I'm not sure you ever get that. You just get better at putting out the fires, maybe.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think you could go down the regulation path, or perhaps people will become more conscious of its dangers and of its potential, and how to shape that energy into something useful. But I think that's going to take a while. I mean, we may be looking at like 40, 50 years, or, I could never put a number on it, but we could be looking at a while until the internet turns into a beast like that, whereby we're more shielded from these kind of harmful effects of it.
Yeah, it's been allowed to evolve unbridled, hasn't it?
More or less.
Until probably just a year ago, where we started questioning some of the downsides, particularly around social media. Right? Would you agree? It really has only been the last few years where we've started to look at the potential, or even entertain the idea there are downsides to the internet.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's taken a few years. Well, it's taken a lot more than a few years, but in the past couple of years, I think it's more of criticism of the internet has become more mainstream.
Okay.
Particularly amongst millennials, actually.
Right, and you should we just stick with the fire metaphor that you said earlier? I think that was a really interesting one. So take the example, maybe if you're living, as tribesmen when they first discovered fire, potentially they could have burned out vast swathes of habitat and crops that were useful and all of that. So that's kind of where we are with internet at the moment. It's just allowed to spread completely uncontrolled. And then it was only later, many hundreds of years later, that we began to master it and use it to our advantage in power stations now, in fire places where there is fire, and it's allowed to be and it's confined to one space, as in we've managed to exert a level of control over it. And I see that very much as the way the internet will go. Yeah. Because at the minute it's allowed to just spread unbridled, unfettered, but we need to almost exert a level of control like we have done with fire, and then it's far more productive than it could ever be, and we've found many new uses for it. Whether that's boiling water in generators generating steam and our electricity, or whether that's just putting some logs in a fireplace.
When it's contained and channeled into a particular use, it's been able to power locomotive engines. It's been able to warm up entire cities or towns. It's
drive our cars. Internal combustion engine.
Well, exactly. Power the Industrial Revolution. Create jobs that up until that point would never have existed, and innovations that have got us to where we are today. However, it had been unregulated and unmeasured and put into the wrong channels, kind of like aspects of the internet now. You'd be looking at mass wildfires. You'd be looking at, mass casualties, and generally a lack of progress across the board. Or maybe you'd have progress in tandem with all those casualties, because I feel like that's where we're at, bringing it back to the internet right now.
Yeah. I think the fire metaphor's so apt, isn't it?
It's very apt, yes.
Indeed. Thank God for Duncan Truthell.
Duncan Truthell!
Jason Capital! I'm so sorry. The audience won't know what the hell we're talking about.
Jason Capital! Anyway.
Jason frickin' Capital. Callaway.
Galloway driver.
You got my 9-iron?
Where's my goddamn 9-iron?
9-iron.
9-iron.
Say that fast.
9-iron. Now watch this goddamn drive with my 9-iron.
I leased 10 shoppers today. What did you do?
I made over $200,000 in sales today. What are you?
It's not about money.
Actually, it is a bit about money.
For me, it's a little bit about money. And that's how much I made.
And for those listening in, they are Step Brother references.
Yes. We must have such jovial tangents in such serious subject matter is discussed.
Well, and this is apt as well, because to deal with the loss, Donald Trump has been
apt.
He's been out on the golf course.
Oh, he has, hasn't he?
Yeah.
No, that's good. I wonder whether someone told him just to leave, or Melania told him to leave the White House because he was becoming an absolute bore.
Well, did you see some of his tweets?
No, but I thought of the Guardian article. Apparently, Melania's counting the days till divorce.
Well, someone on Twitter actually, I think they wrote to Melania saying, "Here's a really useful website that you should now use," and it was a link to Tinder. Meanwhile, Trump's tweets were insane. Like there was one. I think it was a day after it had been called, and it just said in all capitals, "We won this election by a lot."
You idiot! Yeah. Well, it's embarrassing. I cringe on his behalf, and I think everyone else does, or most people.
What I think's bad is that his reaction to this actually makes, obviously him, but his campaign, his party, and actually all the people that voted for him look more foolish.
Absolutely. It's his worst colours. He's showing his true colours at the minute. As much as we could, even now, actually looking back, maybe he was hiding some of the really bad sides of Trump, but this is unfettered, undiluted Trumpism. And it's frankly embarrassing to witness. I'm cringing on his behalf. And I think, like I said, right at the beginning, I said we could have been forgiven for not knowing what kind of a president he would be in 2016. Because, TV's TV and you're kind of a showman on that. Well, like we said, nothing changed. And I think this is the culmination of it. This denial and this sort of, frankly, hysteria is just goes to show what he really is, who he really is, and it's embarrassing. And my God, I can't believe we had him for 4 years, or they had him for 4 years.
Well, it makes the fact that he was in for 4 years even more insane now that he's reacted this way. Because
I'm gritting my teeth, I'm like, God, was this guy really president? Oh my God! Because this is almost the culmination. This is the crowning glory of all of the tweets. This is it. He's going out. Oh, yes. It's a great finale, I've got to say.
It's a climax here, because he's got. He's posting so many unfounded things, and some of it's all in capitals. A lot of it's not grammatically correct. It's just brilliant. It's this beautiful, the sort of mesmerizing clusterfuck of tweets, and all of it is just makes him look more and more like an insane person.
It's quite entertaining. You've got to look at entertaining sense and sort of say, buckle in. It's the last 3 months. Joe's coming in 3 months, and sanity will be restored.
Yes,
and sort of just weather this out. But it's crazy. It's a toddler throwing his toys.
Yeah, I think there was an excellent video, 2 guys that dressed up as Trump and Biden, and Trump was like on his bouncy ball in a creche, in like a kindergarten creche, and Biden was pulling him off, and Trump was going, "I don't want to go. I don't want to go."
Are you like grabbing the furniture, dragging the table?
Yeah, like beating his fists on the floor. Like, no, no.
The sad thing is, that's probably not that far from reality.
Well, people have been saying they're going to have to drag him kicking and screaming from the White
They
House, and I think, do you think he will concede? Probably a stupid question, but do you think he'll concede defeat at any point in the next 2 months before Biden's inauguration?
No, I think he's too much of a narcissist and a sociopath.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing a narcissist lose his shit in real time, and
Yeah.
for better for worse, he's going to be gone in 3 months, which is nice to see, especially now we're seeing really how insane he can be if he wants to. I think this is the culmination.
Just hope he doesn't blow up the world.
This is the cherry on top, but it's one way to go. It's great. I mean, I'd be disappointed if he didn't do this, but hey ho, he's a lame duck at this point, right?
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm glad he did this, actually, because at least it provides us some entertainment, and it makes him look like even more of a charlatan. I mean, yeah, the pure entertainment value and the quality of the memes for the next 3 months is going to be right up there. So, if nothing else, that'll be sort of a nice thing to roll into 2021 in. And then, sanity is restored. Let's talk about Mr. Joe Biden. So, Biden. Yes.
No, go on, Brother Bear. Was that a bit of a Hulk Hogan introduction, WWE? I was trying to go.
Yeah, I was just you go right ahead. I was just sort of hyping him up.
It's Joe. No,
Joe.
I think it's the beast from the Middle East, wanging it
Midwest,
from Midwest Wisconsin, Joe Biden. No,
77 years old, weighing 90 pounds.
God, who would win if they're put in a ring? I think Trump.
I think Trump would win just by his sheer. I mean, he's 6'4", and he's.
Oh God, he's very tall, isn't he?
Biden's tall too. Biden, I think, is about 6'2", but Trump's sheer because Trump is quite overweight. I feel like he
could maul him pretty much, couldn't he?
Yes, he'd steamroller in. He'd roll himself. He'd be doing somersaults. Pow!
That has to happen. Let's do it. White House lawn. 10 minutes. Let's go.
Right, come on, lads. Let's make it a nice, clean fight before Joe goes in.
That'll be the honourable way to go out. He might have to do it, if Trump doesn't want to leave. Might be the way to sort it out.
I think that's how it's going to end.
Style.
Yeah.
Bare knuckle.
Bare knuckle boxing on the White House lawn.
I mean, how much money could he raise for his next campaign? I'd watch it. I'd pay a lot of money.
I think if he did that, it'd just be the perfect way to project what America's image is to the rest of the world.
Oh dear. It probably won't happen, but let's hope it will.
Yeah, let's pray.
So Joe comes into the White House. Is he due to arrive at the late January?
Yeah, I think it's
or February.
January. I think it's 20th of January actually.
Boom, inauguration day, and
yes.
That'll be quite a momentous time. I mean, Trump is the second president in the last 30 years, something like that. That's not won a second term.
Yes, yeah, because he had H.W. Bush and then
Old Bush,
Daddy Bush, and then I don't remember the other one. But yeah, one-term presidencies is actually quite rare in America, relatively rare.
Yeah, and that's going to rub off badly on his narcissistic personality. He's never ever wanted to be second best, and it's been shown that America has chosen, America has spoken. So hopefully democracy will out, and come January 20th we will have Mr. Biden sworn in, and he will roll up to the White House. And brother, do you have a sense of what kind of a president he could be? Is he going to be quite a pragmatist, quite a quiet sort of he's definitely establishment, we know that. So he's off of the establishment cloth, and I suppose nothing mad, no fireworks, but quite pedestrian. That's my feeling. I don't know where that's come from, but yes.
No. I think that's generally my feelings as well. I mean, he's sort of the anti-Trump in the sense in that he's so establishment. He's been in this sort of arena, the political arena, for 47 years. I think when he was an elected official for, I think it was Delaware, he was only 29, so very young.
Wow. Yes, you're right. He was the youngest congressman at the time.
See, I didn't know that.
You see, I did. So there.
So there. Everything you could do, I could do better.
I know America better than you.
So yeah, I think he's very much an establishment figure. Obviously, he's been a vice president, so he knows the ins and outs of the executive branch as well. And he's been on many committees, particularly involved in drug related enforcement, narcotics boards, and things like that. So he's seen it all, really. But I think in terms of his demeanor and his approach, I would say that he's quite centrist. I wouldn't say that he is particularly actually left-leaning, looking at his voting record. And I would say what brings me happiness is that he's much less hawkish than Hillary Clinton in terms of foreign policy, and less interested in intervention and getting involved in foreign wars than she was. I think that I would have loved for Sanders to have been the nominee, but so be it. I think that Kamala Harris, the little I know about her, tells me that she will bring the Biden administration perhaps a little more to the left, and sort of this kind of young new liberal ideas, particularly when it comes to social issues and identity politics. Looking at her voting record. But yeah, generally I'd say quite pedestrian, quite presidential in a way that perhaps Obama was or Reagan was, but perhaps not as great an orator as either of those presidents. But generally, yes, I'd say that what's going to be nice and refreshing is just to have a bit of stability, and just I think the issue with going into America and spending time in America and even watching it as an observer is under Trump, there was just this constant angst. There was this constant anxiety over, what's he going to do next? What's he going to say next? Who's going to be banned from entering next? What's going to happen to the economy next? And I think those kind of mini revolutions, or whatever you want to call them, are quite useful in their own way, but over a sustained period of time, they're unhealthy, they're unsustainable, and they're terrible in terms of contingency planning. So I think that Biden will do away with all that, given how pedestrian he is.
Yeah. And I think it sort of fills me with hope that hopefully he will be something of a healer to the divided America that is Trump's legacy at the minute, and hopefully restores some of that dented middle ground. And like you say, him being centrist might well be the right person for the job there. And
yeah.
And in Kamala Harris, she sounds like she's got the vigor and sort of energy that maybe Biden will be lacking, particularly towards the end of that first 4-year term. I mean, I think we've already seen some signs of cognitive decline in terms. I mean, Biden's always been known for his gaffes, right, and his sort of Bidenisms. But I think if you watch some of the later interviews, especially if you compare them to some interviews done decades ago, there seems to be a trajectory towards decline in terms of his ability to respond succinctly to the point, and even just forgetting what he was going to say, to the point of where I think it's difficult just to blame that on everyday forgetfulness. And, there is the theorizing as to whether it's something more sinister. Obviously, we can't comment on that until there is evidence one way or the other. But I think it is a bit disconcerting, given that he's sort of in the twilight years of his life and yet about to take up the mantle of POTUS.
Yeah, I think it is concerning. I mean, 77 years old. You're looking at the ages when you should really be sort of bedding down on a beach or in your retirement cabin and spending time with family and, reflecting on your achievements and experiences. not going into the most insane high-powered position, not leading the world superpower. But definitely there is a concerning indication of cognitive decline beyond perhaps lack of sleep or beyond everyday forgetfulness. And I think that's hopefully that will be anchored by his running mate to some degree. But on your first point, though, Brother Bear, I think you're right, and I don't usually say this because in many ways, centrist ideas I can find them a little bit irritating. As much as I think there's a need for sort of moderate pragmatism, I think actually more than ever America has needed a centrist. I really, really believe that. I mean, you look at the House of Representatives and the Senate results coming in now, and they're just as divided as the presidential results, you know. So I think that taking that into account, a centrist is going to be really, really useful for the American people right now, and just the general feeling of what America is and the American experiment and how it next develops.
Yes, it's going to be a very interesting chapter, a very critical chapter, particularly because there's a trifecta of various factors and unprecedented circumstances coming to a head early next year, and we're already in the midst of it. Coronavirus, a massive economic downturn, potentially forming into something akin or exactly a depression, or something termed, or something we haven't seen since the 1930s. And then add to that the divided America. So there's quite a potent mix, and I think it does need someone potentially quite dull and middle ground to almost patch up the dents that have been so prominent and sort of exacerbated through the Trump administration.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's all about it's all been about sensationalism and who can say and do the most extreme thing. And who can take their identity politics on the left or the right to another extreme degree of layers. And I think that having a fairly centrist politician in power will definitely restore some sort of dull and boring, normality to the situation. So for that, I'm actually very glad with the candidate they chose, even though, do I think Biden's going to do I think he's going to make America great again? No. Do I think he's going to help working class people become more, basically become masters of their own destiny? No. But do I think he's going to, as you say, bump out those dents? Yeah, I think there's a good chance that he will do that and just restore some more natural rhythms in American politics.
Yeah, I think we hope that as much for the United States as just for the world at large. And healing divides that have been there for a while, and I'm not sure whether Biden's the right person for that, particularly around China, because there tends to be a stronger hostility from the Democrats towards Eastern powers. And so I'm just a little bit concerned there may be sort of a frosty nature to the already less than ideal situation there, particularly with the trade war, and I hope that doesn't escalate any further than it needs to. And Russia as well, that's another significant power, although a dwindling one, that the US needs to contend with. And I think Biden will take quite a staunch stance, not dissimilar to what Hillary would have done.
Yeah, I think he definitely has that in him. I think he could produce some better results for like future China relations. Looking at from a Canadian perspective, I think Trudeau and Biden have a fair amount in common. I think there's been a lot of issues, working with the states regarding tariffs that Trump has introduced over the past 2 years. That's really hampered relations between Canada and the US, and they're each other's biggest trading partners. So hopefully Biden will also loosen some of those restrictions, because I do think Canada and America have always and should continue to make a great team. They're very culturally similar. And it's not healthy for either nation to start putting in all these tariffs and sanctions. So hopefully Biden will relax some of that, and I think that will help both countries prosper. and just remove some of the acrimony and animosity that the world is feeling towards America right now.
Yes, absolutely. And I think I can speak to the overriding feeling of relief when Biden was declared the winner, past that critical number of 270. And I just hope that brighter times are ahead, because I think 2020, for many reasons, has been a difficult year, not least COVID and the economic downturn that we're seeing. And I just hope 2021, there's reason to be optimistic. Biden taking the presidency, potentially a vaccine on the horizon, and just hopefully a step back to what we would term normality would be a welcome change after an absolutely chaotic year.
Absolutely. A very welcome change.
We are all exhausted, I think, in one sense or another.
I think so. I think that's the word. It's exhaustion, isn't it, of the constant ups and downs and changes. And I think we need a restoration of normality. And let's just hope that this vaccine comes soon after, or around the time that Biden takes the stage.
Yep.
Because that will be yet another step towards restoring life to what it once was.
Absolutely. So let's get out the banners. Let's get Joe on the pedestal. Let's get him out there. Let's get the new lick of paint on the White House. Let's get things back to normality.
Give him his Zimmer frame. Let him get back into the Oval Office. Let him decorate it as he sees fit. Let's get this bloody new administration going.
Let's get the new administration going. America first, world first, collaboration, space and the moon and Mars and beyond. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us for another brilliant podcast. I enjoyed that. Brotherly Bear, thank you so much for joining me on the election journey and the reaction live from Canada and London.
Thank you very much, Brotherly Bear.
Thank you, guys. Take care. Over and out. Pow!